What's up, guys? Welcome to Bleav in Rams, part of the Bleav Network. Erin Coscarelli back with you. Be sure to do all the things. I say it every week. Subscribe, comment, rate, follow this podcast. You can also catch us on Bleav TV. Follow us on all the socials. Today is a big day for us because we have the voice of the Los Angeles Rams. Is this going to be your 9th season as play-by-play radio? Mr. JB Long, thank you for joining us, by the way. That is a long time to be with the team. Is it 9? Is it year number 9 this year?
Hard to believe, but that is correct, Erin. Good to be with you. And yes, I always am able to fall back on my eldest child's age to keep track. He is now 8, which means that Sean McVay's 8th season, and we predate him by 1 year.
Wow.
The Rams returned to Los Angeles in 2016. So yeah, here it is, season number 9.
Yeah, you've been with the team for a long time. You've seen quite an evolution, and we're going to get right into it because the season is here, our first preseason game. Before we get into all the action on the field, how was your off season? I can't believe it's already football season. It seemed like it flew by. But how was the off season? Did you go anywhere fun? You travel anywhere? You've got 2 boys.
Yeah, we had a great summer. They're very into camping right now. So we got to explore the greater LA area with some campsites, and anything with dust and marshmallows and stars they're pretty happy with. So that makes it easy on mom and dad in some ways and more challenging in other respects. But yeah, we had some great vacation time, family time, summer camp. But there's nothing better than training camp in terms of getting the traction back for a new season. I think that's when I'm at my happiest and my best. And my family is very much a part of Rams football as well. So something we all enjoy together.
I love that. And I love that the Rams community always loves to bring the families together. We saw a lot of families at training camp. I loved watching your camp interviews. Was there a camp interview for you during the training camp sessions that stood out to you in particular? Because you had some pretty funny conversations with so many different Rams players.
Yeah, well, DeMarco and I have had the privilege of getting to know Sean McVay very well through the Coach McVay show. And anytime we can sit with him, it's always good for a laugh. I'm super fascinated, as I know you and your audience are as well, by this juncture in Matthew Stafford's career, right? That was a good one. But maybe my favorite was probably sitting down with Cooper Kupp for lots of reasons. I'm a big believer in the Cooper Kupp comeback tour here in 2024. I'm not saying he's going to win another Triple Crown necessarily, but I know how hard last year was for him and how much he had to grin and bear it to be on that field. But we've yet to see him and Puka together at their fullest fruition. And I think that's going to mean really good things for the Rams. But as you know, he's also kind of launched a show with his wife and Dodo Coffee, his new personal brand. So we had some good back and forth about that. And I'm now a Dodo believer. It's part of my morning blend. So that was one of the highlights of camp.
That was one of the interviews I was referencing, which you really put him on the spot here. I mean, I didn't know which way he was going to go. You guys basically forced a Starbucks coffee down Cooper Kupp's throat. And I mean, he handled it with grace. But yeah, you guys put him in a compromising position. Who thought of that idea, by the way? That was very clever.
Well, I was just listening to some of his more recent shows, and there was an outtake that he and Anna had at the front end of their show, basically a hypothetical: would you rather drink Starbucks or be traded to have to play for the San Francisco 49ers? And so that was just a great reflection of how through and through a Ram he is at this point after all his seasons here in Los Angeles. So I thought our audience would enjoy seeing him make that decision live. We kind of painted him into a corner, but like you said, he handled it with a lot of grace.
It's fun to be able to have fun with these guys, their personalities, and you mentioned it. And I think it's one of the things that Rams fans can be super excited about this year. You're right. Cooper and Puka on the field together. And another wide receiver we saw really make some amazing plays during the preseason. Let's get into the game. Before we talk about the action, though, there was a certain somebody on the sidelines. I don't know if you got a chance to this guy named Tom Brady was there. He suited up. He's not in action. The internet was in an uproar thinking that Brady was actually going to be calling the game. I don't think he's not calling the game until September. But what was it like having him there? That must have been pretty cool.
Well, speaking of pretty eventful summers, I'm not sure anyone's had more of one than Tom Brady. So seeing him in the wake of everything that he's been up to lately was interesting. I think my favorite spin on it was the Rams capturing him and Super Bowl champion Andrew Whitworth side by side. And the sentiment is essentially like the GOAT and also Tom Brady, or like Super Bowl champion and then a former NFL quarterback.
Mm,
Just because of how high esteem we hold Andrew in and what he meant to that Super Bowl run a couple years ago.
mhm.
But I personally think Tom Brady is going to be an incredible analyst, is really going to enhance Fox's coverage. I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully even seeing him on a few Rams broadcasts, even though I know he's a unique thorn in the side of longtime Rams fans. But yeah, I think Greg Olson was tremendous last year with Kevin Burkhardt as well. I'm sorry to see that pairing split up, but I think only under this unique circumstances it makes sense. And yeah, I think we can all appreciate Brady in a jacket and a long sleeve shirt rather than his TB12 Patriots uniform or even that of the Bucks.
Yeah, he's going to be great. I think he's going to be great. I mean, look, I was nervous. I wasn't sure how Brady would be received. We saw that he could take several jabs at the roast that happened this offseason. I thought, you know what? He's got a stellar sense of humor. He can take some hits on and
Yeah.
off the field. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm stoked to see Brady in the booth. I think he's going to do a great job. Look, no doubt he's got a lot to offer, a lot of insight, and it'll be interesting to see that translate to the booth and how he sees the game. Yeah, I'm excited for sure. Let's get to the game, shall we? The Rams pulled off a W against the Cowboys at home in SoFi. Obviously, we know Sean McVay doesn't like to start his starters. So we got a lot of action from guys in the mix. What stood out to you the most? Because another wide receiver made an incredible impression. Did it stand out to you? Was that one of your big takeaways from the game?
Yeah, you're referencing Jordan Whittington, who was described as the heartbeat of a very good Texas team. And he played in one of, if not the greatest receiving corps in college football last year. So maybe was flying a little bit under the radar, as evidenced by the fact that he fell outside the top 200 picks, right? But no one finds better receivers deep in the draft than the Los Angeles Rams. And it was hard for me, Erin, not to perceive shades of Puka Nacua, and even to mention that out loud, as reticent as I am, knowing that no one can compare to the rookie season that Puka just had because it's never been done in NFL history, much less in Rams history. And certainly, if things go according to plan for this year's Rams roster, Jordan Whittington will not be asked to do anything near what Puka Nacua was asked to do for last year's group. But at 6'1", over 200 pounds, to see him transition through the catch, break a tackle, gallop into the red zone. It was a lot of what we came to know and love from Puka Nacua in his record-setting rookie season. But I think that was definitely one of the more positive returns. I, believe it or not, was most anticipating the debut of new kicker Josh Carty, knowing how much of an issue that was for the Rams the last couple of years, but especially poignant last season. For him to settle in, make a couple of kicks in his new home at SoFi and the game-winning extra point, maybe nothing projects forward more consistently or importantly than him being a reliable kicker, place kicker for the Rams, and certainly improving their kicking game. What else did I like? Tyler Davis. We all know the void that the Rams have to fill on their defensive front. If they found another day 3 potential starter, kind of in that like Sebastian Joseph Day type mold, I think that's tremendous. I actually take a lot of encouragement, Erin, from the players who didn't play. Like when you look at their top 3 selections, if you're telling me that Jared Verse's role and impression is already so secure that he doesn't need to get even a preseason snap to play on the edge, I take that as a great sign. I'm not sure anyone had a better summer than Braden Fisk, his Florida State teammate. Likewise, his presence on the defensive front locked in for week 1 at Detroit. And even Blake Corum. We know how hard it's been for young running backs to get in Sean McVay's huddle. The knowledge, the trust, the execution that you have to demonstrate. If he doesn't need to be tackled in the month of August, then I take that as another great indicator of the work that he's put in to earn the trust of his quarterback, his head coach, and the Rams organization.
Yeah, you recently posted on X, a great quote saying, seeing the Rams' top 2 draft picks in street clothes tells you everything you need to know about the impression Jared Verse and Braden Fisk have made and the role they'll have for this defense, which I thought was an interesting observation that you made, alluding to exactly what you just said. Rams fans can maybe breathe a sigh of some relief, hoping that they can compensate for an Aaron Donald. I think that's been the big theme this offseason is how can the Rams compensate? Because there's no real replacing Aaron Donald, right? Do you have any concerns? Like, do you have any concerns about this defense? Because what I've been hearing is they're trying to make this offense a top 5 offense to almost sort of hope that they can give the defense some breathing room to catch up. But, for you, any initial thoughts, concerns?
Well, let me preface it by saying that I did not anticipate here in the middle of the preseason being able to say with conviction that I think the defense has had the better of the summer so far. That I think Chris Shula's group has played with greater energy, greater urgency, and has made a dent. Like, I'm super impressed. That's not to say that I'm 100% convinced it's going to translate starting in the regular season. But compared to some of the injuries that the Rams have suffered on offense, particularly on their offensive line, compared to some of the action I've seen in joint practices, I have a total trust and confidence in Sean McVay and the offense because of the continuity, because of what they've put on the field in regular season action so far. But I'm optimistic. I'm bullish on these Rams defensively. Now, they're going to go up against a gauntlet on the front end of their schedule. Like, this is a very difficult opening month or two to have a new defensive coordinator and to be getting acclimated to life after Aaron Donald. The Detroit Lions may be the best offense in football. The Arizona Cardinals were one of the most improved teams offensively once Kyler came back from that ACL in the second half of last season. We all know the San Francisco 49ers are next. Caleb Williams is the 1-1 in this draft and walks into a great situation offensively in Chicago. And then you finish with Green Bay before the bye. Like, show me a 5-game rip like that on anyone else's schedule that compares in terms of offensive prowess. So this Rams defense and first-year defense coordinator Chris Shula, they're going to get thrown into the deep end. But to this point, here heading into the second preseason game, I'm not sure there's anything more they could do to show me that they're ready for the challenge.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, great point. You're right. And, not having Puka out there, can you give us any updates on how, we were told he's week to week. He's dealing with a bursa sack situation that can impair his mobility. They're trying to be careful. Is there anything that you can tell us on how Puka is trending? How's he doing? Is he doing okay?
Erin, I'm just reading body language and reading between the lines, as I know you are and everyone is this time of year. And based on the reflections I've seen from him personally and from his head coach, Sean McVay, I would say the level of concern is relatively low, which is something that I think all Rams fans can take comfort in. And not just Rams fans, but any fantasy football drafters that are coming up on the deadline here to pick their go-to target. So hopefully that means good things for Puka individually and for the Rams offense.
Well, and you mentioned the offensive line getting a little banged up. It seemed like it was Sean McVay's worst nightmare of all the teams, it seemed like the Rams really walked away or hobbled away from training camp, dealing with, like you said, a ton of injuries. Why do you think that seemed to happen? Is it because players knowing they're not going to get a lot of time in preseason, let's say, in the games, they're going to go extra hard during practice? I mean, it just seemed like every day there was something that came up and happened with somebody. Do you have an idea of how that happened, why that would happen?
Yeah, Erin, I don't think there's any through line necessarily, but I am a believer in regression to the mean. And when you look at how fortunate the Rams were in terms of their health and their adjusted games loss metric, they were very fortunate last year. And that played maybe the leading role in their 7-1 finish on their path to a playoff spot. And that's been sustainable throughout Sean McVay's tenure, but it's a blessing, not something that you can bank on. And I'm glad for the Rams that at least all three of those injuries up front seem to be short term. I'm not guaranteeing that each and every one of those individuals are going to play against the Detroit Lions, but I think there's a chance for each of them to do so. And in the meantime, I really have great appreciation for the likes of Joe Noteboom, who, aside from center, can plug and play as a starter just about anywhere on this offensive line. I'm encouraged by Logan Bruss, a former top pick in a Rams draft from just a couple years removed, getting another chance, another opportunity, and I think performing at his highest level as a pro so far in that first preseason game. Similarly, Zach Thomas had one of the toughest days I can remember from last season in Cincinnati when he was thrown into the fire as well. And maybe I was guilty of writing him off in terms of his future on the Rams offensive line. Here he is thriving at guard, not at tackle, but at guard, and giving the Rams some much needed depth and competing for a roster spot. And then you look at the draft pick of Bo Limmer. I think he was regarded as one of the more valuable selections of the draft, potentially stepping right in as their backup center, and was really encouraged with the way that he helped Stetson Bennett handle the operation in preseason game number 1 against the Cowboys. So no one wants to be forced to develop depth along their offensive line in the month of August. Like, that is not what you're aiming for. But given the predicament the Rams have been placed in, I would say they're in a much better place this week heading into preseason game number 2 than I gave them credit for lining up to face the Cowboys a week prior.
A collective sigh of relief. Thank you very much, JB. I mean, you know what? The other thing that was interesting, and I'm glad you mentioned Stetson Bennett. He had 4 interceptions. But what I did like was the ability to bounce back after those mistakes. What's your takeaway of what you saw from Stetson on Sunday?
Erin, I take 6 months off and I can barely talk through a football game. I'm not sure when you take a year off how you can quarterback a football game, right? So I give Stetson a lot of margin for error in terms of knocking off the rust, in part because life in the NFL as QB3, you don't get many reps. Sometimes you get no reps. Like, this whole summer has been predicated on preparing Matthew Stafford to beat the Detroit Lions and have another MVP caliber season. And then also making sure that Jimmy Garoppolo, starting in week 3, is his backup. So there's just not many opportunities, even in practice, even in training camp, for someone like Stetson Bennett. And that's why you saw him take every snap of that preseason game, even though he threw 4 picks. And some of those interceptions were egregious. But I went into that game saying, essentially, I don't know what he can prove professionally today, good, bad, or otherwise. I don't know what a preseason game against the Cowboys is going to do for Stetson in terms of his professional prospects. But I can celebrate this moment in time for him personally. And that was before he threw the game-winning touchdown. So I feel good in both regards, that he made it back to this Rams organization, that he played in that game a year removed from his previous opportunity, and that he overcame more adversity on the field this time to lead that only touchdown for either team in the game.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a great reframe. You're right. I mean, for people listening at home, didn't play all last year and obviously had some issues, needed to take some time away, and to see him come back, and like you mentioned, the silver lining of being able to perform the way he performed, even though those mistakes were egregious, I agree with you, says a lot about the development of him in that building. They need a guy like him, like you said, especially with Garoppolo being out those first 2 games. Let's talk about Stafford, because he's had an interesting offseason this year as well. They restructured his deal. He came, he played. There were so many question marks about, was Stafford happy with his contract? Took a team-friendly deal, after the Super Bowl. And it was a weird situation because I understood both sides. I understood both predicaments. You have a quarterback that's 36 years old, but still delivering dimes. I mean, he still has it. He is still an elite quarterback. And but you can't forget the fact that he's 36. And I think, how long will he maintain that elite level may be the question. Obviously, he sustained that injury in 2022. What were your thoughts with Stafford in this sort of adjusted deal? And then also, what are your thoughts on Stafford in the future? What are people talking about in sort of your rooms where, it just seemed like there were a lot of question marks about that?
Yeah, I feel like we could do a whole Bleav in Rams episode, maybe two, on this individual topic. I'll try and encapsulate it as succinctly as possible. And it dawned on me seeing Tom Brady there at SoFi that he has kind of skewed our perspective on quarterbacks in their late 30s or even aiming for their 40s, because he did what very few had done before him and did it at a high level. But I also think he's expanded the runway of a lot of these high earners, let's face it, and their primes. And so he's put a blueprint out there that franchises don't have to give up on an Aaron Rodgers or a Matthew Stafford or this next wave of quarterbacks who are having great seasons deep into their 30s. And based on what I saw from Stafford at the end of last season, and really the front end of last season, I remember saying, like, this guy, even though the results and the wins may not be there yet, he's playing at one of his highest levels. And I sincerely Bleav, because I've studied this in depth, there's a strong case to be made that 2023 was Matthew's best season as a pro, including his Super Bowl season. Wow. So there's a reason why the Rams doubled down and built it around him again, right? Like when you invest guard, center, guard, that says we want Matthew to quarterback this team and maybe the next one and maybe the one after that too. Now, I can spin it the other way, and I know that you can too, because I've watched Matthew Stafford's career nearly end on the field in each of the last two seasons. In 22 in New Orleans and in 23 in Dallas, there was a very real possibility that those injuries meant that's it for Matthew Stafford, not just as a Rams quarterback, but as an NFL quarterback. And so when you say that in terms of that give and take at the negotiating table, you could see both sides of the argument. Me too. Not just because I'm wearing a Rams shirt and I can say, well, wait a second, Matthew and your representatives, we just signed this contract 2 years ago. Why are we opening it up? And from Matthew's standpoint, I can say, when I look at the highest compensated quarterbacks in the league right now, and there's more of them jumping up every day, I know I'm better than him, and him. So why would I not make at least $1 more? I'm glad that it didn't seem like either side of that negotiation felt more conviction about being right or winning, as opposed to coming to terms that will make the 2024 Rams the best that they can be. Yeah. And then I'm not saying this in the context of his contract, Erin. I'm just saying this in the reality of a 36-year-old playing quarterback in the National Football League. Everything is year to year at the most, if not week to week, day to day. So for those wondering, is Stafford going to be back next season? I don't think he, nor the Rams, nor anyone involved in that conversation has the information they need until February of 2025, if that makes sense. I think the door is definitely open to it. I'm optimistic that it can happen. I'm rooting for it to happen. But I don't think next year or how many more years is pertinent to this moment in time, because there's just too many unknowns.
Yep. I was just going to say, we don't know yet. But I'm glad you referenced that, JB, because I think both sides handled it with professionalism. Everybody showed up to work. Everybody spoke very highly. Stafford's attitude was great. And at the end of the day, they want to win games, it seems like. Yeah, the whole Tom Brady thing is a great point. Stafford being 36. If you look at, Brady, who was 44, 45 when he retired, Stafford's considered a baby. I mean, that's very young now. But when
your career has a driver's license, you've done a lot of good things to stick around this game. How much longer you can continue to drive is anyone's guess. But I think I would like to believe, Erin, he's a Hall of Famer today if he never took another snap. But I'll feel a lot better about him having a bust in Canton someday if he has another Pro Bowl, All-Pro caliber, MVP caliber season individually, and especially if he can do what he had not done before arriving in Los Angeles, which is to win another postseason game, hopefully more.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to let you go soon. Real quick, though, next week, Chargers. What are you looking for in that game?
Well, let's go back to Stetson Bennett, because one preseason game does not eliminate all the rust that we talked about, right? But given the note that he and the Rams finished on, can they take that next step forward? Now, if you're saying, okay, we're going to game plan all week for the Chargers and we're going to get Stetson ready to go for that game, I would say absolutely they're going to build on that. But that's not the environment we're in. We're operating purely on focus, concentration, execution, and confidence. And he's going to have to do it largely with the same group of people around him, which I think is a boon to Stetson and his chances of making this team and hopefully securing that backup spot for the next couple of weeks into the regular season. I think there's spots open on this defense, especially with the latest injury to Ernest Jones at off-ball linebacker. I think the Rams have to take a real hard look at their depth and their talent in the middle of their defense. I'm hopeful that Ernest can play all 17 games. I don't want to, panic anyone listening to this program, but I think there's jobs to be won still on defense. I really do. Maybe not on Saturday against the Chargers, but how about midweek against the Dallas Cowboys when they go to Oxnard again? The back end of this roster is really filling up and firming up quickly, both in terms of how you're performing on offense and defense and the roles that we're seeing examined in the kicking game with Chase Blackburn, special teams coordinator. So it's one thing to make a good first impression, like a Tyler Davis did, like Logan Bruss did, like Zach Thomas did, who we mentioned. But to build on it week over week and show the consistency that I know this staff is looking for to have a helmet on game day, Saturday will be another important step in that goal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, we're so excited. Thank you. Thank you for making the time. We know you are a very busy man. Cannot wait. Week 2 preseason upon us this weekend. JB, as always, thank you so much for making the time. We appreciate you, and we hope to get you on again soon.
Erin, thank you for the invitation. I believe in Rams, and I'm wishing you all the best this season. Glad you're captaining this ship.
Thanks, JB.